The chaplain running the prayers was the former vicar of St. Paul's Monastery and Church in Jarrow, which is where the monastery that Ceolfrith was abbot. Ceolfrith was sort of on my stretch goal list, but I wasn't sure. I was actually planning to go to Ripon to see Wilfrid, and Martin impressed on me that I needed to go north up to Jarrow. The church in Jarrow right now, a lot of the church is kind of a reconstruction of a medieval church that was done in the Victorian period. But the older part of the church, there's a kind of the chancel back behind where their altar is. There's kind of a chapel-y type thing. And that's actually an Anglo-Saxon church. A lot of the windows had been kind of replaced either in the medieval period or in the Victorian period. There are actually a few Anglo-Saxon windows as well. The roof has clearly been redone at least once, but the building itself was actually built by St. Ceolfrith in, I think, 685. Now, there's a great story about Ceolfrith. He wanted to send a gift back to the Pope in recognition of Augustine's mission to the English. And he had 3 Bibles made, 3 complete copies of the Bible. He got the local king to donate land capable of supporting 2,000 head of cattle, because that was how many cows he was going to need in order to just produce the parchment for these books. So, if it's $300 for a cow, that's like, over $500,000 worth of value in the parchment alone. These things were incredibly valuable. Made 3 copies. And 2 stayed in England, and there are fragments of one of those have been preserved. And one of them he decided to take with him to Rome. So he decided to go all the way to Rome. Now, he catches some sort of plague in France, and he dies, and he's buried in a parish church somewhere in France. But he ends up at the rest of the monks continue the journey, and they end up at a monastery in Tuscany. And the monks there say, no, leave it with us. We'll send it along down to Rome. But they don't. They scratch out the inscription, and they say, not from Ceolfrith, from some other guy, and not to the Pope, but to us. And so they catspaw this book. Well, 800 years later, the Pope starts fishing around asking for all the old copies of the Vulgate Bible. And this monastery in Tuscany says, oh, we've got an old one. They send it down along. They didn't do a great job scratching it out. And so the folks at the Vatican Library were like, look, this belongs to us. And so they took it. And it finally got to where it belonged. And it turns out this book, which is actually named after the monastery in Tuscany, it's called the Codex Amiatinus, is now the oldest complete copy of the Bible in Latin, in the Vulgate Bible. And it was produced in kind of the wilds of Northumbria on an estuary, kind of way up in the north here. A few years ago, the local town of Jarrow produced another book in honor of the 130th anniversary of the Codex Amiatinus. What they did is they had local school kids actually do illustrations of their favorite Bible passages, and they kind of collated it into a book, and they printed it up on glossy paper, and they actually bound it with leather. It's really, really sweet tribute to Ceolfrith's work. So Ceolfrith is another sort of lesser-known figure, but would have acted as Bede's spiritual director, and another sort of key figure in the way that the church grew and developed here in England, and another piece in the foundation of our own spiritual heritage.